Hi, this is Cindy from VintageToNew with another quick video tutorial. This time we're going to be making bias binding or bias tape. It just depends on how wide you cut it to what you end up with. This is one quick and easy method to end up with a lot of bias cut with very little fabric. So without delay, let's get started right away. So let's get started. So we're going to be doing bias binding today. Bias binding is used if you have something that has a curve in it that you have to go around. If it's completely straight, you don't need to do bias. We're going to be using an 18-inch square. The reason I'm doing that is it's a good size to work with, and if you wanted to make bias binding or bias tape out of a fat quarter, you could still get an 18-inch square. So the first thing I did is cut off my salvages. So this was the cut edge and my salvage was here, cut it off. But I put a pin here so that I would know that that is my salvage edge, because you don't want to get confused about where everything is. So fold it in half up this way. And what you have is this is your bias edge. So if you pull on that, it stretches a lot. So you can see that. So now I'm going to fold it up this way again. And then I'm going to rotate it down. So here's my bias edge. And we have to cut that. And so what I like to do is just to line it up like that. And if you have a rotary cutter and a ruler, just nip off the tiniest little bit up the edge like this. Okay, so there we go. So now we have it cut. So you open it back up. So here's my bias edge. I'm going to open it back up. Here is my salvage edge. So now I'm going to rotate it so that my salvage edge is down here at the bottom and this is up here at the top. So if you take this salvage edge here and put it up here, that's not right. You see how we end up with another big triangle? We don't want that. So I'm going to show you the right way. So you take your salvage edge and you flip it so that it goes over here, and look, it looks like a pennant. You know, it's got the little triangles that hang down. All right, so we put this together here. So this is my salvage edge, and this is the other cut edge that would be the same as the salvage edge. This is the bias, and this is the bias, and it's got this little pennant look to it. All right, so there's something that when you have sewn for a while, you finally figure out. It's a little bit confusing. But when you put something together, sometimes you don't line up the very end with the edge. Because see, this has got this angle on it here. And this is important for this whole project. You do it so that you have about 1/4 inch hanging out up here. So I'm going to take my pin out from my salvage edge. I'm going to put that right there. So I've got about 1/4 inch hanging out the top right there. I'm going to come down here to my other side. And it should be the same. Okay, so get it lined up. And I do have a little 1/4 inch dog ear sticking out right there. It's exactly what I want. Because when I sew at my 1/4 inch right there, it's going to make an even edge. And that's what you want. So you could test it. I'll show you. So let's just say that that's my 1/4 inch seam. And when I open it up, it's going to line up on the edge. All right, so we're going to take our pennant looking piece. We're going to go in our machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way down. Okay, so I went over and pressed my seam open so it's nice and flat, and you should have something that looks like, I think it's called a parallelogram. Geometry wasn't my favorite subject, but it's got the edge here, and our bias is right here on these edges, and you can always just do a gentle little tug to verify, but there it is. All right, so now we need to draw lines that go across here at whatever size that you want to make your binding or your bias tape. If you're making bias tape, you're probably going to do it at 1 inch. So you would draw a line at 1 inch. But for the project I'm doing today, it's a bag, and I need bias binding for the inside. And I'm going to use a Fix-On pen, but if you're brave, you don't have to use a Fix-On pen because you're going to be cutting right on the line that we're going to draw, and it will be in the seam allowance. But if you make a mistake while you're doing this, then you might be in trouble if you use something like a regular pen. So we're just going to draw this across, and it's not quite long enough, my ruler, so I have to go down and carry it over. So making sure, I can see that my pen skipped at the very beginning. Go back and make sure you have a line, because we have to have a line to cut on. So we'll just continue on doing this all the way to the top. So I have my lines all marked, and I have about 1 inch left over here at the top. So I'm just going to cut that off and set it aside. This is great bias fabric, so sometimes you need just a little tiny piece. So I'll just start a little stash, put them in a Ziploc bag of little bias tape pieces. Okay, so now we go back, we put right sides together, and we're back to what we talked about in the beginning. If you didn't get your lines all the way to the edge, they have to go all the way to the edge for you to make this work. Okay, so we take our pieces and we put them together and start with the second one. It's just a little bit easier, and this line goes off this way, this line comes up this way, and we're going to sew at 1/4 inch, and we want these two lines to intersect at 1/4 inch. And so I've marked 1/4 inch with my pin's seam allowance all the way up and down. I have a big dog ear over here, and I have a big dog ear over here. Now I want to test and see if I did it right before I sew it and cut it. So I'm going to pretend that that's sewn, and look, these lines line up just perfectly. So if this was sewn at 1/4 inch, everything's lining up. Can you see those lines? They line up across this way. All right, so I'm going to sew this 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so I have sewn my 1/4 inch seam, and I've double, triple checked, and everything lines up just great. Now, if I had not used a Fix-On pen, you could take your time and go over and press this seam open, and you'll just have a nicer finish. But for right now, I'm just going to finger press mine. Because I used a Fix-On pen, if I were to go over and press this with an iron, all my lines would disappear. All right, so then we start right here, and you start clipping on this line that you have drawn. And you spend time just cutting exactly on that line, and you'll just go around and around and around as you go through cutting this. So I'll see you at the other end. Okay, so I've cut it all out, and out of an 18-inch square and 2 1/4 inch pieces, this is 3.5 yards of bias binding. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and so until next time, this was Cindy from Vintage to New.